Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Come back. For those of you who don't know, I run a weekly podcast called the Skeptic Zone Podcast, and if you'll indulge me, I'd like to do the introduction to the show I'm working on at the moment here at Skeptics in the Pub. So, and play along, be enthusiastic. Thank you and good night. Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone Podcast, episode number 797.
Whoa!
For the 14th of January 2024. Richard Saunders coming to you tonight live from Sydney Skeptics in the Pub.
Hooray!
There are thousands of people in the room crammed in here. Yay! And Tim Mendham. Coming up on this week's show in the Trove segment, we're going to be looking back, reminiscing, thank you, of the TV doctor, Dr. James Wright. Who remembers Dr. James Wright? Yes. I was doing some research into alternative medicine lately, and his name came up quite a lot. I was quite surprised, so we're going to be looking into that. Also, Maynard wraps up his series of interviews with Susan Gerbic from Skepticism on Wikipedia, and I interview Tim Mendham from the Book of Tim and the editor of the Skeptic magazine. But now it's time for me to really run downstairs and get my food from the kitchen, which is 3 floors below. And while I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Well, Skeptic Zone listeners, we're here in the Skeptic Zone studio with that Susan Gerbic, of course, who is head of the Guerrilla Skeptics. Also, there seems to be an image, and some people said that the Guerrilla Skeptics, there's a nemesis of you somewhere on Wikipedia that you're fighting against, that there's some other group of an equal or slightly more or lesser power than you that goes on like, the Federation of Superheroes, that kind of thing, Actually, what superhero would you be if you were a superhero on the web there? Would you be like a Barbara Gordon librarian kind of person? Would you be like a Captain America punching people,
Gosh, you put me on the spot.
Like the professor in the wheelchair, it makes,
Oh, my goodness. Which would I be? Let me think about that a second. Oh, but we don't have a nemesis. And that is the question I get the most. Yeah. Is people are just probably coming in and reversing all your edits. And we don't have that happen. My team is taught to follow the rules. We follow all the rules of Wikipedia. The things that are unique about us is that we train and we discuss and we talk about the changes that somebody wants to make. And before we make the page live, most times the thing is reviewed. And when we write a Wikipedia page or we rewrite a stub, which is very common for us, somebody has gone through that. In fact, it's probably had 5 or 6 people go through and make suggestions to clean it up, to fix it. So when we make it live, we're not making a couple sentences live. We wipe the old one and we replace it with a new one. So it's very hard to go in and start changing and reversing things when the page has just been made live completely. Mm-hmm. It's very hard for people to do that.
So with Guerrilla Skeptics, you don't want like a Mel Gibson in Lethal Weapon. You don't want someone slapping their badge down on your desk and saying, I don't want to follow the rules. You're going, you've got to follow the rules. I'm too old for this Wikipedia. You don't want rebels like that because they're going to stuff it up.
Right. Exactly. We do not want people like that who have an agenda or are very think they're going to settle a score. That's not going to happen in my group. In fact, if you have a conflict of interest, I am probably going to make you avoid that conflict of interest, at least until you are a senior editor and you can approach the subject with some kind of decorum and follow the rules. We're not out to do that. It is definitely a place where we have Wikipedia's interest in the best. That's where we are. We're thinking people all over the world are going to be plagiarizing our stuff. So let's make sure that we have the best plagiarizable stuff for these students to be able to get on the reports. I mean, we know everybody's going there. So telling people to avoid Wikipedia is just a non-starter. Go to Wikipedia, read the citations, follow the citations, but start with Wikipedia to get a good overview of what's there. You don't plagiarize it. I mean, you're not supposed to, but we do know people do. So let's make sure that they're getting the facts. And that's where our mindset is.
What sort of person who might be out there listening now is the kind of person that's going to get the most out of being with the Guerrilla Skeptics? What sort of personality, what interests might they have? What sort of abilities would they have? Because there must be one in your head that you can see.
You are a terrific interviewer, Maynard. I tell you, I tell everybody that, and I said that in Melbourne. The thing about it is you really need to be on Facebook and comfortable using Facebook. People who try to use Facebook and go there once a day or something, they don't usually do as well because we're a social group. And part of the ability to have the group as I have it is to interact with your team members, your peers. They post that they need feedback on their page. And so we hope that you're going to give them feedback, even if you're not an expert on the topic. If you read that Wikipedia page that somebody else has written and you don't understand what is going on with that paragraph, or it needs to be changed, because we want this to be read by people around the world. The people who interact well or who do well in our project are people who use Facebook and they're comfortable with it. Also, people who are self-starters. I hate chasing people around and forcing them to get stuff done. I want them to be able to take feedback well, nothing critical, but take feedback well, and also be good at handing out feedback. And you don't have to be a great speller. You don't have to be great at grammar. You do not have to be a native English speaker. All of those things can be fixed. Time is the question I get most about people. How much time do I have to devote to this? It takes about 4 months to go through the training, though many people go through it much quicker than that. Once you're trained, you can go at whatever speed you want. The thing about it is that if you are someone who is learning a language, let's say you take some classes to learn a language and you learn it, but then you don't go and practice it, then what was the point? So I think of our Wikipedia training as the same way as learning a language. It's not necessarily difficult. I mean, though it may be for some people, but I do all the training and I don't think I've had a problem training anybody. Everybody is trainable, especially even those people who barely use computers. I've had one editor who did some amazing edits, but he just couldn't be wrong. His point, he had a hard time struggling with what if it's wrong? Not what he's saying, but how he said it, how he wrote it. And there's so many different ways to write. You're summing up other people's opinions. That's what you're doing. You don't get to put your own opinion on Wikipedia. You're using the experts' opinions. And so interpreting it is part of the fun of it, I think. But there are people who have a lot of trouble with it. They want me to tell them what to say. And I don't know what to tell them. You say it's like cooking a cake. You know, there's a recipe, but you can go here and there a little bit on the side of it. And I don't want to make it sound like we're trying to abuse anything or go outside of the rules. We're certainly not. But a good Wikipedia editor is somebody who's a little okay. I mean, you can even use ChatGPT to start out. Like if you're looking at, like, you want to put 3 or 4 sentences about something that's going on, maybe start with ChatGPT, get an idea of what you want to say, and then manipulate it into your own words, of course, using the correct citations. But, there's no right or wrong in a lot of these places.
And so where can they go to dip their toe into it and see if that might be the kind of thing for them? Because it's a very fulfilling thing to be part of.
Mm-hmm. Some people do crossword puzzles. Some people do Wordle. Some people do Sudoku. Some people edit Wikipedia and they just make small changes, sometimes every day. And if they really are interested, if you're thinking about it and you don't want to approach me right away, why don't you go to a Wikipedia page and look at all those blue links around the outside of the text? I mean, the history button, the talk button, the languages. There's You can't break Wikipedia. So just go and click on all those links around the outside. Get familiar. Go and explore. Hit random articles. Look at talk pages. Go do all that stuff and see if it's, it's a huge world out there. They've got all kinds of things in the Wikipedia world that they could be interested in, and go and explore. And then if you think that this might be something you would like to attempt, I'm a good teacher. They say I've trained a lot of people. Come to me on Facebook, send me a private message so that I'm your friend, because I have to be your friend to put you in the secret cabal. And we all want to be in the secret cabal, right? And so send me a private message. I need your email. I need to know what language you want to edit in. I want to know what your username is. And I'd like to know where you heard of me from. And one of our biggest feeders of our editors is the Skeptic Zone. I have so many people who come to the program from the Skeptic Zone. These are great listeners. And I tell you that there's something about them. They just feel like this is an impossible task. I can't believe you're trying to rewrite Wikipedia in all languages possible on science, scientific skepticism, claims of the paranormal. And they say, this is just unreal. How in the heck is this ever going to happen? When do I start? And I have that attitude from people all the time. It's so important that we need to get in the battle and take this on.
Well, if you're listening out there, you think this might be me, do a bit of investigation. Like Susan said, you can't break Wikipedia, have a bit of muck around there and then approach her. Yeah. But look, just at the end of the interview now, I just want to get you to say hello to your good friend Mark, because Mark told me a great story about himself in Melbourne. And it might not be interest. Richard might not even put it in the interview. I don't mind. But he told me of when he was learning cards. And when he would put a single spotlight of himself, make sure he'd be seen in the window of his apartment. So when he was drinking, he would have a bottle of bourbon there, and he'd practice card tricks that could be seen from the street, and he'd do it for hours, over and over and over again. And him telling me that made me want to take up cards, which I haven't done, but he painted a picture perfectly in my mind about a magician doing that and learning their craft. And that's kind of what you're doing with these people. You're learning the craft of Wikipedia and how to do things properly.
Oh, I love that story. No, I don't think I knew that exactly. That is really inspiring. And you're talking about my boyfriend, Mark Edward, the mentalist. Yes. Oh, he's going to really love to hear that. Thank you.
Oh, because he wouldn't even, he told me that while we were traveling on a tram, while you were taking photos during the Melbourne conference many years ago. And that has stuck with me, that image. And it reminded me of, I think it was Teller who used to steal his parents' credit cards, and he would palm their credit card and have a normal day with them, interacting with them without them seeing that. And that's how he learned how to palm things really well. And this was Mark's way of doing that over and over, but he had the spotlight, a little bit of a light on himself, looking a bit, and then he'd just do that on a Friday or a Saturday night, and people in the street could just see him doing it for hours and everything. And I thought, wow, there's something noir about that I really like.
He's an exceptional man, and he could not be with me on this trip to Australia and New Zealand, and I sadly miss him. I'm going home tomorrow. He's been asking almost every day, when are you coming home? When are you coming home? We miss each other a lot. And he tells me, the funny thing is, Maynard, is I'm flying home to San Francisco from Sydney tomorrow. And I told him this morning, I'll be home tomorrow. I'll be there Saturday. He's like, Susan, tomorrow is Friday. You will not be here tomorrow. I'm like, no, I'm leaving tomorrow. I will see you tomorrow and Saturday. And he's like, no, it's not. So we've been having a lot of fun with this time zone thing.
Look, well, give him my best wishes. It's been many years since we've seen him. He's been one of the most interesting people I've ever met, and you've been one of the most interesting people I like to talk to. Oh. And you can use any of the photos of me on the internet. Susan Gerbic, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maynard.
Now here's a note from our friends in Victoria. The Surf Coast Skepticamp 2024, and this will be on the 24th of February. And this is a note from my friend Don Hyatt. Australia's longest running Skepticamp, the Surf Coast Skepticamp, is back again after a 3-year COVID-enforced break. The date is Saturday the 24th of February, located at beautiful Aireys Inlet, and beautiful it is, on the Great Ocean Road, 150 kilometres or about 2 hours from Melbourne. Many skeptics have made this a trip away for the weekend or longer. And I put up my hand and I say I was one of those skeptics. In early 2020, just before the pandemic, I made the trip with my dear friends Michelle Bickersma and Steve Roberts to that area. And what a wonderful weekend we had. Not only was it just a joy to be in that part of the world with fabulous company, but we had a ball at Skepticamp. That's when we ran the test of the premium wine card. This credit card-sized card, which we've reported about before. The claim was that it can improve your wine simply by rubbing the card on the glass. Nevertheless, being skeptically minded, we had to test it. So together with the help of all the attendees, we tasted many little glasses of wine, some treated with the wine card, some not. The results have been published a few years ago, but no surprise, the magical wine card didn't make any difference. Skepticamp gives the opportunity for skeptics to contribute short, 20 minutes, presentation on a range of loosely skeptically related topics or areas of personal interest. Previous topics have included strange energies put to the test, like the premium wine card, exposing the rorts in tertiary education, update on Ken Harvey's whack-a-mole project, why clinical trials are not always the best choice, climate change in Australia, fact versus fiction, crowdfunding and scams, just how smart are skeptics? That's a good question. Free will. Is free will an intuition or an illusion? Now, for more details and bookings, you can head to Eventbrite, search for Surf Coast Skepticamp 2024, or use the URL tinyurl.com/SCSC2024, and I'll add a link to that in this week's show notes. If you're in the area, if you're in Melbourne, if you're in Victoria, hell, if you're on the planet Earth and you can make it to the Surf Coast Skepticamp, it's one of the happiest weekends I've had as a skeptic. It was just joyful company, interesting conversations, presentations, and testing lots of little glasses of wine. Surf Coast Skepticamp, put it in your diary now. And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham. Well, I'm still here at Sydney Skeptics in the pub, and I'm sitting up here at the head of a very long table, stretching into the distance. How many people can we fit in this pub? It's incredible. I'm with Tim Mendham, who is the Executive Officer of the Australian Skeptics and editor of the fine journal you all have in front of you there. Please take a copy. Tim Mendham. A big hand for Tim Mendham. It's the biggest applause you'll get all year.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Can I just say that I am a non-independent organisation, and every view expressed here is the view of Australian Skeptics.
Well, at least you got a laugh tonight. That's a great tune. Tim Mendham, you've been the editor now since 2009.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Nine, yes.
And all the magazines you have in front of you, I think you're responsible for the editorial decisions and writing many of the articles.
That's right, actually, yeah, that's very true. And I should add that my wife's responsible for the pictures. She does the design, so it's a family affair.
Lots of nodding in the audience there, yes, that's great. And let's go right back to the beginning. I mean, we all have our stories, and everybody here probably has a story of why you got into skepticism. Mine was when I was a kid in the 1970s, I used to think the UFOs were coming any day now, like a lot of people still do. What got you interested in this fascinating area?
I was actually kidnapped by skeptics at a very young age. I used to belong to a family of gypsies, but I got kidnapped by skeptics and taken away. So I've never been allowed out since.
I believe it.
When I was younger than I am now, there used to be I think I mentioned this, there used to be a serialisation of von Daniken books. Now, von Daniken appears, a lot of older skeptics would say, yeah, Von Daniken helped me become a skeptic, right? But
Carry to the gods.
Carry to the gods, question mark. Going to have the question mark at the end. And in one particular newspaper, they were serialising part of the books when it was first coming out. And then the following week,
That's him on the phone now. What is that?
hey, Eric, right. The following week, they then had some responses from people. A lot of scientists wrote in and said, I'm an archaeologist. The archaeology in Von Daniken's book is rubbish, but the astronomy is really interesting. And an astronomer would write in and say, I'm an astronomer. Astronomy is rubbish, but the archaeology is really interesting. And that taught me two things, actually. One is that there's a lot of BS in Von Daniken, and two, never trust a scientist outside of their area of expertise, because they have no idea what they're talking about. But that started me off. And I can remember I was a teacher for one whole year, and talking to students about the Bermuda Triangle and things like that. And as a total believer, not having done my own research, right? But yeah, as a total believer, and I was talking about these things, these fascinating things that are going on. And then gradually you think, hang on, you hear other views eventually from wherever, I don't know, because obviously the believing point of view is so widely promoted on TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, wherever. And the disbelieving, the skeptical view, has a very tiny distribution. You really have a hard time finding it. I wrote an article not that long ago about Von Daniken and the books that debunked him. And Von Daniken's books have sold tens of millions of copies. And the debunking books have sold tens of copies. So I mean, and it's that sort of situation. I'm currently reviewing Charles Berlitz's book about the Bermuda Triangle, which sold many, many copies, and the book by Lawrence Kusch, who said the Bermuda Triangle mystery solved, explains everything in the Bermuda Triangle, but sold a lot less copies. So, but that's the way I got gradually pulled in, and for my sins, I was in publishing, doing a magazine about science, and we used to have an exhibition. We used to go to these, I used to report on exhibitions of scientific equipment, technology, etc., and some of them were at the US Department of Commerce. And the fellow there who was in charge of those exhibitions, the chief exhibitionist, right, and you will know him, right, was Barry Williams. Barry Williams used to work for the Department of Commerce, and he put on these exhibitions, and he and I would talk about everything else but what was on the exhibition. And in 1980, when Dick Smith and James Randi did their divining test in Australia, and Dick Smith said we could do this all the time, Barry was the one from New South Wales who contacted Dick Smith and said, if you ever set anything up like this, I'd like to join. Of course, that's an invitation saying, not joining, you're running it. And it was actually mainly out of Melbourne, but there was a little organisation here in Sydney, and I was invited to join, sit on that committee, which was an eclectic bunch of people, to say the least.
It still is.
It still is, yeah. And so I was there for the word go.
Yeah.
I was only 5, right? Because I'd only just been kidnapped as a kid. But I mean, and it developed from there, and therefore, halfway through the 80s, this was in 1981 was the first issue of the magazine.
Yes.
Halfway through the 80s, the fellow who was running the Melbourne group, Mark Plummer, got a job actually with the US Skeptics. And no one else wanted to do it in Melbourne, so it moved up to here. So we moved the National Committee for what it is, it's only a notional idea anyway, to Sydney, and then the magazine followed. Because I was working in publishing, guess who got to be the editor of the magazine? As well as secretary and treasurer. In those days, we did it for the love of it, and not for anything else, certainly. And so therefore, for about 4 years or so, I was editing the Skeptic magazine. And that was when it was done on a Macintosh printer, a little inkjet printer, and every time you were trying to print something out, it would crash, right? And the memory was 2 little cards, 300 and something kilobyte cards, but it was fun.
Yeah.
It was very, very, very primitive, smell of an oily rag, well, not even a smell, there was no oily rag, but it was a great deal of fun, writing a lot of stuff for it. It's a lot smaller then than it is now. When I finally said that's enough, Barry took it on for 1 issue of the magazine and stayed for 60 or something, quite a lot. And then gradually I got dragged back in by the same people who kidnapped me in the first place and became executive officer and editor of the magazine. And I've never looked forward since.
That's a very subtle dig there. And as we keep saying, the issues are in front of you folks. Please don't leave without one. And if you're interested in what Tim was saying about the earlier issues, they're all available for free. Just go to skeptics.com.au, click /magazines, or just look for the link, and you can download the entire back catalogue, save the last 4 issues. And you can see those early iterations and how they were laid out and the articles.
There was one major development that I added to it, the magazine. We had a coloured bit of paper on the outside.
Ooh.
And it was pretty impressive actually at the time, yeah. But yeah, we're the only skeptical group that actually publishes, gives away our magazines for free. Silly us, you know. We do keep the 4 most recent issues for subscribers. And they're not here on the table for you to sort of grab a copy of. But we do keep those, so there's something for subscribers there. But yeah, all the back issues, you can download them and keep you reading for a long, long time.
Ladies and gentlemen, a hard-working man indeed, a man who knows his skeptical ins and outs, skeptical chops, Tim Mendham.
Are you watching the skies for UFOs? Are alien spaceships buzzing your backyard? Or are you watching UFOs on YouTube? The UFO movie They Don't Want You to See has only been released on YouTube for a little under 2 weeks, or about 2 weeks, and it has already attracted over 220,000 views. Congratulations to Brian Dunning. And also good news is if you use the Tubi system, or Tubi system, T-U-B-I, and you can find that at tubitv.com, you can search for UFO movie and Brian's movie will also appear. A new way for you to watch the UFO movie they don't want you to see, despite people seeing it. Time once again to take a running jump and dive into the digital archive that is Trove at trove.nla.gov.au. Of course, the wonderful resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia, full to the brim. Well, probably not. There's probably room for a lot more digitised newspapers, digitised magazines, on and on and on it goes. Having sung the praises of the Trove archive, we're actually going to look at a reproduction from a microfilm in the State Library of New South Wales, where I go occasionally to do more research. We have the Sunday Extra. Now, I think that could have been a magazine or a section of the paper, dated the 19th of June 1983. And this is a story or an article or a report by Dr. James Wright, who many people will remember from Australian television. He was known as the Merry Medic. He only died a couple of years ago, aged 94, I think. His real name was John Knight, but his professional name was James Wright. And for my Australian listeners, a little bit of trivia. He was the uncle of Chopper Read, Mark Chopper Read, the infamous criminal. Anyway, getting back to the story, it's called 2 bob each way. And that's an expression used mainly in horse racing, where you have a bet on a couple of horses or you diversify your bets or something like that. A GP's Guide to Fringe Medicine. And in the little box at the top of the article, which is very hard to read because it's on a dark background, Dr. James Wright, one of Australia's best-known doctors, believes many of his orthodox colleagues have ignored benefits that can be achieved through alternative medicine. Wright now practices a combination of orthodox and fringe medicine. It's like having two bob each way on health. All right, this should be interesting. It wasn't so long ago that people who dabbled in fringe or alternative medicine were dubbed quacks and charlatans by their orthodox colleagues. Alternative medicine was regarded as akin to water divining, spoon bending, and run-of-the-mill black magic. The more conservative segments of the medical profession are still wary, but increasing numbers of mainstream general practitioners are coming to terms with the fact that orthodox medicine as practiced in the Western world is not always able to offer total relief from all illnesses. Well, I'll break in here and say, duh. Sounds like a straw man argument. What do you think, Michelle? Michelle Bickersma, who did a series of logical fallacies. Is that a straw man? These doctors are using unorthodox methods to complement their conventional methods with surprisingly successful results. Many have been driven to explore alternative medicine by their concern that modern wonder, and wonder is in quotation marks, drugs do not necessarily cure diseases but suppress symptoms. Many are concerned about the side effects of these drugs. This is interesting. Who wrote this? It seems to be by somebody called Alison Stewart. All right. Dr. James Wright, one of Australia's best-known doctors with advice columns on health matters, television and radio appearances, and 15 books, was trained in orthodox medicine at Sydney University and has practiced for 30 years. Yet Dr. Wright's new book, Alternative Medicine, Golden Press, $4.99, establishes his deep interest in unorthodox methods of treatment. The book gives a broad insight into alternative medicine. It covers in general terms acupuncture, medical hypnotherapy, homeopathy, hydrotherapy, herbal medicine, chiropractic, osteopathy, zone therapy, not the Skeptic Zone therapy, naturopathy, iris diagnosis, iridology, orthomolecular medicine, I'm not sure what that is. I think that's what the word here is. Biofeedback, negative ion therapy, and other treatments, says Dr. Wright. In recent years, there has been a resurgence of interest in what is often called fringe or unorthodox methods of treatment. This has spurred me on by the increasing incidence of side effects of many modern-day wonder drugs. Over the years, it has become more and more apparent to me that something is lacking in organised medicine, as I and about 30,000 other Australian doctors practice it each day. Wright used modern drug therapy along the lines he had been taught. He found that while in many cases the patient improved, in other cases the patient did not improve or deteriorated due to side effects from medication. And break in here to say, remember that if a drug has no side effects, it has no effects. He started reading about alternative medicine and discovered what he regarded as the, quote, ideal result, end quote. I practice Western medicine, but to this I add a great variety of other modalities that have probably been considered unorthodox at some stage. He says, the most outstanding feature is that while alternative medicines may not always effect a cure, they at least in the main do not cause any harm. Many alternative practitioners use nature's inherent energies to bring about a cure. They believe the body can heal itself given the right conditions. Their efforts are merely an attempt to let the body care for itself in the way that it was probably initially intended. Ideally, orthodox medicine might benefit if it took an even closer look at many of the fringe practices widely used in this country. Here are some of Wright's views on various alternative medicines. And the list is hypnotherapy, homeopathy, acupuncture, hydrotherapy, chiropractic, osteopathy, zone therapy, and negative ion therapy. But for the sake of brevity, I might just skip over the hypnotherapy because we would rather concentrate on some of the classics, I think. Let's have a look at homeopathy. Now, these are all quotes from Dr. James Wright, but I might forego the voice effect and just read this through. Homeopathy. This is the use of minute doses of drugs which in larger doses produces symptoms identical to the symptoms of the disease being treated. Dosage is so small that no symptoms are produced. Cutting in here quickly to say he's got that wrong straight off the bat. Of course, we know that there are no doses, no minute doses. There's nothing. It's the ultimate scam. We read on. Every illness, its practitioners believe, gives rise to a specific series of symptoms which can be mimicked by a particular drug. By matching the two accurately and then giving that drug, they claim the body's healing system will respond in such a way that the illness is rapidly cured. Their medicines cause no ill effects, no man-made side effects, are entirely non-toxic, and are safe even in pregnancy. What's more, they taste nice and may be given to any person of any age, including babies. Breaking in here to say, I'm gobsmacked that a medical professional like Dr. Wright could say this and not just think of what he said, the nonsense he just said. We read on. They believe in treating the whole body, not just the symptom. Most of their products may be given in conjunction with orthodox drugs prescribed by doctors. To modern orthodox medicine, the basic homeopathic concept that, like cures, sounds an incredible line of attack, for current methods of treating patients are the total reverse. If a person runs a fever, for example, treatment is aimed at reducing the fever, not giving medication to produce fever. Many of the major drug companies, which have a masterly hold on the discovery and production of new chemical formulations, which equals an enormous financial interest, have managed to keep it suppressed on any large scale. I'm finding this now a little bit disheartening to read. Good heavens. Although modern-day orthodox medicine barely recognizes homeopathy, practitioners point out that their views are not far removed from current thinking and practice. Probably the most outstanding is the concept of immunization. A small amount of the organisms causing a certain disease is introduced into the system. The body then responds by automatically producing antibodies against that disease. These remain in the system for many years, probably indefinitely, and offer protection. This is the basis for the success of such vaccination programs as the diphtheria, whooping cough, and tetanus injections, and Sabin polio liquid, measles, mumps, yellow fever, and rubella. I'll break in here once again and comment that I guess Dr. James Wright was not familiar with the fact that many homeopaths, probably even as far back as 1983, regard real immunization as poison. Many are anti-vaxxers. Homeopathic remedies, the practitioners say, cannot possibly suppress symptoms. The doses are too small. They stimulate the body's natural resilient powers to help the body recuperate by its own ability. All right, let's see what he has to say about acupuncture. Acupuncture is the treatment of symptoms by inserting fine stainless steel needles into certain spots on the body called acupuncture points. These are located on meridians, unseen channels along which the vital energies of the body are claimed to flow. This is said to relieve obstructions enable normal energy flow to become re-established. Of course, as we know now, these meridians are just imaginary, made-up mythical lines or energy channels in the body. Although the way in which it successfully removed symptoms has been an enigma, recent scientific work has found that immediately following the insertion of an acupuncture needle, there is a rapid rise in the bloodstream of two potent hormones called endorphins and enkephalins. I hope that's pronounced. They are very similar in nature to the drug opium. So there is an inbuilt pain-relieving system generated, and this acts to control centers of the brain to negate the sensation of pain. The trend today is to use fewer needles, and some may insert fewer than 10. Needles are particularly fine and can be readily sterilized. The needle is inserted with a quick downwards twisting movement. It is often hard to feel it going in. Stimulation then follows. Sometimes the needles are left intact with little movement. At other times, the doctor will twist them manually. Treatment will continue for a variable period of time. It may last 15 or 30 minutes. Results are often rapid. Certainly many complaints take time to relieve, but conversely, many acute symptoms seem to receive almost instantaneous relief. Acupuncture has shown itself to be a very versatile tool. The relief of pain seems to be its chief benefit. Therefore, disorders that produce pain are the ones most likely to gain relief. This may include orthopedic complaints, joint affection, such as arthritis, headaches, fibrosis, mitosis, neuralgia, and sciatica, and many painful gynecological disorders. All right, we'll skip over hydrotherapy. Drink more water. Chiropractic. This is the treatment by manual adjustment of the spinal column so that any abnormally displaced vertebral bones pressing on the spinal nerves are manipulated into place. The practitioners claim normal energy flow to internal organs supplied by the nerves is reconstituted and full vitality of the organ is re-established. Chiropractors believe illness is a consequence of obstruction to normal energy flow. In turn, normal elimination of toxins from the body via lungs, kidneys, and bowel system is prevented. A condition called auto-intoxication is established and adverse symptoms develop. Most illnesses, they say, are due to this mechanism. Good health with normal vitality and capacity to perform in a fit manner occurs when nerves are uninterrupted and the innate intelligence has complete and free passage throughout the nervous system. The chiropractic belief is that the spinous ligaments may contract and in doing so may pinch, irritate, or constrict the nerves just after it has left the spinal canal. The chiropractic principle is to seek out the obstruction, relieve it, and so enable the nerves' forces to freely flow again. And yet another comment from me. Okay, it's 1983. This was written as I have to keep reminding myself, and I've been doing this for nearly a quarter of a century, so I've learned a lot about the false claims of much of the alternative medicine, so I'm still a bit gobsmacked. Osteopathy. This is the treatment of the entire body by a variety of means, chief of which is manipulation of the spine for the correction of bony and ligamentous anomalies. It is very similar to chiropractic, but it goes several steps further and embraces treatment of other joints, plus a total approach to the general well-being of the system. The osteopathic concept is that the human being, from an evolutionary point of view, has only recently learned to stand on two limbs. This has suddenly thrown great pressure on the limbs, plus the back. which has to attune to a new stance. All other joints of the body have likewise been affected by the change in position. Most osteopaths engage in massage. About 60% of the time is spent manipulating the back. The rest is involved in treating other joints and soft tissues. And the next one is zone therapy. Adherents to this belief claim the body is divided into 10 zones, which cut through the system longitudinally at the end of the feet, the hands, and the scalp. Energy flows through the zones, affecting the organs located within each boundary. Obstruction to the normal flow of energy, created by deposits accumulating over the nerve energy endings in the hands, feet, and scalp, produce symptoms from the relevant organs. Diagnosis is made by feeling for tender spots on the palms and soles. Treatment involves deep massage over these tender areas. Practitioners claim a high degree of success. It is often teamed with other forms of therapy, either orthodox or alternative forms, in many cases with acupuncture and hypnotherapy. And finally, we have negative ion therapy. Positive ions in the air may produce many untoward symptoms. Negative ions, on the other hand, dispel and impart a feeling of better health and well-being. Generators, I remember those from this era. I remember these. Now, the voice you hear at the beginning of every Skeptic Zone episode, the wonderful Jim Wilshire, the late Jim Wilshire, dear friend of mine. I first came to know Jim in the mid-'80s when he was a radio announcer in Sydney. And I went in to visit him in the studio, and there on the desk in the studio was a negative ion therapy generator. They were all the rage. What a strange memory to have. Just quickly recap and continue. Negative ions, on the other hand, dispel and impart a feeling of better health and well-being. Generators may produce large masses of negative ions, which, when inhaled, can bring increased vitality, fewer symptoms, and lessen the adverse effects of the positive charges around us, the exponents say. It has long been known that when hot, windy weather prevails, some people feel tired, lethargic, irritable, and unhappy. Professor G.F. Schulman, working in the Sharov in Israel, found that when the air was filled with positive charges, which occurred when the weather changed to hot and windy, people in the Sharov rapidly developed symptoms. These included nausea, vomiting, migraine, and swelling, and also allergy-type symptoms such as tight chest, a wheeze, irritation and itch of the eyes, nose, ears. He noticed an increase in the blood hormone serotonin, well known as a precursor to migraine and various allergic states. He found that when these patients were given air rich in negative ions to inhale, their symptoms tended to vanish. Smog, foreign particles, pollens, and items that produce allergic reactions can be removed before they affect the sensitive individual. Now, what I find particularly stunning about this whole piece was it does seem simply Dr. Wright was just reading the brochures from these various modalities and not a sentence of skeptical or critical analysis, even when we're talking nonsense. And as I said earlier, it appears he was ignorant as to the true nature of homeopathy, or ignorant to the fact that meridians are simply made up. And it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing. And I'm so glad that the State Library of New South Wales and the National Library of Australia keep these things. It is so important to keep this history, to see how people were thinking at the time, especially from our perspective, looking back at this article over 40 years later. So there you go. A look back into what Dr. James Wright was thinking or writing all those years ago. And again, I know there will be listeners in Australia who will remember Dr. James Wright fondly for his many appearances and magazine columns, shall I say, usually giving good sound advice. But you too can hopefully find some good sound advice, hopefully, when you visit Trove at trove.nla.gov.au, or do what I did, take advantage of your local library and see what they have on file, because you never know. Oh, believe me, you never know what you might find.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Hooray! Did you enjoy this week's show?
I like the middle bit.
Thank you, Tim. Coming up soon on the Skeptic Zone, we have a series looking at the mediums. TV mediums like Doris Stokes, a medium from many years ago, and all sorts of other things. But for this week, and a quick thank you to all the people out there who subscribe to the podcast every week via Patreon or PayPal. Without you, there would be no Skeptic Zone. But for this week, from Sydney Skeptics in the pub, this is Richard Saunders and friends, signing off.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to everybody who listens after the music for the Easter egg. It's not even Easter. We're going to play the dice game. I've got a 10-sided die here, and I'm going to roll it 3 times. Where's my Skeptic Zone notebook? Whoa, the Skeptic Zone dice is trying to escape. Here's my Skeptic Zone notebook so I can write the results so I don't forget. A free page. Okay. Skeptic Zone pen. Oh, there goes the Skeptic Zone headphones. It's not really branded like that, but I'm in the studio, I'm in the recording booth, so what the hell. Okay, I'm going to roll this dice 3 times. There's the birds out the window want to play along too. And you're going to use your predicting power to predict, guess, or use your psychic visions to divine the numbers coming up. I'm going to guess ahead of time. Let me see, I'm going to guess the numbers 6, 2, 9, and for the supplementary, 1. Here we go. First roll. The first number coming up is, in fact, 10. 10. All right. No match for me just now. Next number, here it is. Here it comes. The second number coming up is 10. 10 and 10. All right. Rattle, rattle, rattle. Third number coming up. Guess away. Here it comes. You'll be pleased to know it's not a 10. In fact, it's 8. So the 3 numbers this week are 10, 10, and 8. And now one more, just for fun, the supplementary we call it. Here it comes. The last number is a 6. So I predicted 6 for the first number, and it turned out to be last. I wonder what that means.